Hello, my name is Dr. Gerald Katzman. I'm going to start by sharing my slides. Okay, now the topic for the day, the International Century of the Child, Is It a Dream? Is a follow-up from a previous presentation, Child Development Leading to Pursuit of Virtues and the Avoidance of Vices, which you can access on YouTube. The idea there was uh, mechanisms for optimizing growth and development of children. In this lecture, we're going to look at some difficulties in implementing such an effort. So the topic again is the International Century of the Child. Is it a dream? Why does humankind need it? How do we get there globally? We'll start with an overview. We'll look at examples of childhood maltreatment globally, and we'll consider an approach to remedies. Now, the General Assembly of the United Nations passed a proclamation designating the 1979 as the International Year of the Child. And that was done under the auspices of UNESCO, the United Nations agency, whose role is basically guarding social, cultural foundations that underpin stability and dignity and recovery for communities in crisis. The idea was to draw attention to and hopefully address problems that impacted children around the world. As a consequence of this effort to provide support to children in need, a new document was drafted, and that was the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which we abbreviate as CRC. The CRC was adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1989. Subsequently, it was ratified by all UN members except the United States of America. United States representatives in the Senate expressed concerns regarding an interference in sovereignty and control of parenting decisions. So the CRC has never been brought up to the full Senate for a vote. Unfortunately, only UN members who ratify the CRC are eligible to be members of the CRC Oversight Committee. The role of the Oversight Committee is to evaluate progress made by members in addressing the needs of children globally and to make recommendations as to how the rights of children can be better served by individual states. The fact that many impediments to the psychosocial and physical development of children persist throughout the world is a testament to the work still waiting to be accomplished. A listing and explanation of some of these critical problems that adversely influence the growth and development of children is in order to document areas where much effort is clearly still needed. Now, we'll start just by briefly discussing child labor. Child labor is the exploitation of children through any form of work that deprives them of their childhood, interferes with their ability to attend regular school, or is mentally, physically, socially, and morally harmful. As of 2023, in the world's poorest countries, 1 in 5 children was engaged in child labor. Poverty and lack of schools was considered the primary causes. UNICEF notes that boys and girls were equally involved, but girls often were doing unpaid household labor. UNICEF and the International Labor Organization estimated that about 168 million children worldwide were involved in child labor in 2013. This just shows a little girl picking cotton and out in the noonday sun, and not something that you would think would be terribly useful in supporting growth and development. Now, child labor and slavery in the chocolate industry is sort of a special consideration regarding labor. Chocolate is a product of the cacao beans seen mainly in Western Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Cocoa is produced the cocoa produced goes to companies who make a multitude of end products. Chocolate companies are aware of the child labor, human trafficking, and slavery that's involved in harvesting and initial processing of the cacao pods. Cacao farmers are usually way below the poverty line. Child labor is used to keep the price down, while end products result in huge profits for manufacturers. Traffickers are known to abduct children from countries next to the farms. The traffickers often tell victims and their parents that the job pays well, but hide the poor living conditions and lack of schools and dangers of work. Most of the trafficked children are between the ages of 12 to 16. There's long work hours. They climb the cacao trees. They cut down the bean pods. Yeah, they're carrying heavy bundles of pods through the jungle. At a base station, the pods are cut open to harvest beans with great danger of exposure to insecticides. Some corporations have tried to develop inspections of the farms. The lack of inspectors and enforcement of reasonable standards have made corporate efforts ineffective. Certifications that slave labor was not used are often misleading. This just shows a child cutting down a cacao pod right here. And here you see a child who demonstrating all the cacao beans that have been extracted from the various pods. Now, another topic that we're going to briefly discuss is that of corporal punishment and psychological abuse of children. Corporal punishment and psychological abuse, which involves shaming, coercion, intimidation, have been used by parents and teachers to discipline children for decades. The apparent purpose of corporal punishment is to have the resultant physical pain deter similar behavior in the future. The problem with corporal punishment and psychological abuse is the production of fear and anger, which is repressed and serve as a source of negative mental energy that may be expressed in antisocial and violent behaviors in later years. When a child works daily to avoid insults by caregivers, there's little opportunity to experience trusting, supportive human relationships. The frequent result is a stifling of emotional empathy and participation in violent activities that a society may promote through false narratives, apparently as a result of a disregard for pain inflicted on others. Corporal punishment and psychological abuse traditionally have been used as a form of discipline with authoritarian parenting. The antidote is authoritative parenting, where trusting, supportive relations between child and caretaker are established. Authoritative parenting involves establishing interpersonal attunement, teaching reading skills early, modeling of caring and helping behaviors, and human relations programs for children. Parenting teams pre and postnatally may be organized. Now, another topic is that of the which is rather pervasive around the world, is the teaching of hatred to children. Hatred may be defined as intense ill will, a great dislike or aversion, enmity or malevolence. There's a well-known link between learned hatred and resultant violent speech and actions. Teaching of hatred represents a special form of psychological abuse propagated by families, institutions, and countries. Kieran O'Hagan has defined psychological abuse as a sustained inappropriate behavior that damages mental processes of a child, such as intelligence, memory, recognition, perception, attention, language, and moral development. The hatred is commonly instilled by false narratives that may distort history, promote false beliefs, and propagate negative feelings towards others. Storylines may incorrectly depict one group as a victim of another, misrepresent beliefs of another group as heretical, or undermine the humanity of those to be victimized due to a desire for dominance. Repeated exposure to these narratives often results in their internalization, occasionally achieved through coercion and intimidation. The result is a false belief that may manifest itself in violent actions against an individual or a group so targeted. Thus, hatred represents and results in a character trait, a vice, that unleashes mere self-interest so one ignores or fails to see or consider the interests of others. If peaceful societies are our goal, then nonviolent conflict resolution and other virtuous traits need to be promulgated. Traits such as tolerance for and appreciation of individual differences and reverence for the value of human life are desirable. This is so because virtues blunt mere self-interest so that one can see and promote the interests of others. As a vice encountered to the values that most civilized people consider virtuous, the teaching of hatred to children is immoral. Consequently, such children suffer an arrest in moral development that fulfills the definition of psychological abuse. Exposure to authoritative parenting, modeling of caring and helping behaviors, early literacy, reading stories with a moral, and human relations programs for children could prevent hatreds. Using the law to outlaw the teaching of hate, thwarting hate and violence in the media, and cooperative projects in the community would likely also be helpful. Now, child soldiers is another issue we're briefly going to address. Thousands of children are serving as soldiers and in other capacities in armed conflicts around the world. The service involves either government military groups or armed opposition groups. Children may fight in front lines, participate in suicide missions, and act as spies or messengers. Although not necessarily combatants, girls may be forced into sexual slavery by militaries. Many children are abducted or recruited by force. Other children join out of desperation, thinking the armed groups offer a better chance for survival. Child soldiers who survive conflict often suffer from psychiatric disorders such as depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. Poor literacy often is seen and contributes to high incidence of poverty and unemployment in adulthood. Alcohol abuse, increased suicide rate, and violent behavior is often seen after enlistment and training to fight, even if not in combat. Beginning in the 1990s, treaties were drafted to reduce the use of child soldiers. Treaties have not, however, eliminated the use of child soldiers. Even some economically powerful states still train adolescents for military service. So in a number of countries, the use of children in armed conflict, terror groups, and insurgencies continues. Thousands of children are either compromised or killed as a result of their recruitment to participate in armies and militias. Clearly, the treaties themselves are not the answer if mechanisms of enforcement are not in place. This just shows a child soldier with an assault rifle. And by the way, these rifles in recent decades have been made much lighter and can be used by very small children. This shows who knows, about a 4-year-old holding an assault weapon, a member of the Hamas culture. And this just shows a little girl walking down the road. She's slinging an assault weapon on her back and compromised by the need to do so. The other thing that happens in areas of conflict is children who may or may not be involved in the actual fighting result in some serious difficulties. So they can suffer physical violence and injuries. Sexual and gender-based violence occur also in conflicts, child separation from families, abduction and trafficking. Children may be associated with armed groups, may be forcefully associated with armed groups, and then detention, then they're detained by a capturing group when they're actually victims. Food insecurity is common, limited access to water, sanitation, and hygiene, denial of humanitarian support, targeting of schools, childcare centers, and play areas does occasionally occur during wars. Disruption of education is common. Mental health considerations because of the trauma of the battles. Exposure to harmful substances is common. Grief and loss of family members. And resettlement is often necessary. And these problems for children in conflict settings were outlined from the American Academy of Pediatrics policy statement, The Effects of Armed Conflict on Children and Adolescents. This was published this year. Now, another issue is global poverty, hunger, malnutrition, and starvation. The World Health Organization defines poverty as when an individual or household income is below what is needed for sustenance. Poverty is often associated with food insecurity, poor access to medical care and education. Poor literacy, unemployment, inadequate housing, and poor sanitation are common. Unfortunate choices may result due to the struggle to survive. Children and families with poverty suffer high morbidity and mortality from infectious diseases and food insecurity. The scenes of such starving, malnourished children have been depicted for decades on television and resulted in successful fundraising by NGOs. Some countries and religious institutions have also provided support. The great need has not been adequately addressed. Estimated that more than 3 billion people in the world live in poverty. There is loss of human potential from lack of education and malnutrition. Estimated that malnutrition is responsible for about 1/3 of all deaths in children less than 5 years of age and causes intellectual impairment in many survivors. A recent study showed that malnutrition at 3 years of age was associated with poor cognition at 11 years of age, independent of psychosocial adversity. So it's apparent that good nutrition in early childhood should enhance long-term cognitive development and school support and school performance. Global warming leading to food security is another issue. Global warming has been associated with food insecurity in certain areas. Climate shocks like droughts, floods, kill crops and livestock, degrade soils, damage infrastructure, and drive up prices. Result is often conflict, displacement, and mass migration. People would not stand idly by when they cannot feed their families. If average global temperature rises 2 degrees, millions more people are expected to be pushed into hunger. Lack of concerted efforts to decrease fossil fuel is an issue that needs to be addressed further. Now, going forward with a plan to solve the many problems that children face in their growth and development is something that certainly needs to be attended to. John Locke famously introduced the theory that the human mind at birth was a blank slate, except for innate reflexes. In the Latin, that was termed the tabula rasa. Therefore, it is one's experiences and learning that results in knowledge, beliefs, morality, and other emotional and cognitive faculties. And largely, this is still a valid theory today. So that it's clear that it is important to promote a path leading to optimal physical and psychosocial development. The path should lead to character traits like benevolence, helping behaviors, constructive creativity, and skills for nonviolent conflict resolution. Leaving a century to obtain this goal would seem reasonable if not interrupted by human-made disasters. There is a need for an organizational structure for the plan. Fortunately, the UN Oversight Committee for the Convention on the Rights of the Child could be such a supervisory group. Lack of participation of the United States in the OCCRC is a stumbling block. Again, as mentioned previously, interference in sovereignty and lack of freedom to parent were given as reasons for non-ratification by the U.S. Senate. This is a poor argument because children's rights are protected through laws and agencies in the United States, and ongoing improvements continue. In the USA today, there are few interferences in culturally appropriate parenting. Reasonable concerns for aberrant parenting have been scrutinized for years in the United States. Presently, there are child protection teams in the USA that respond to reports of child maltreatment. Indeed, a pediatrician may lose his or her license to practice for failure to report suspected child abuse in the United States. Lastly, there is evidence that children are often maltreated in countries that have ratified the CRC. Only by objectively evaluating the situation in each participating country is progress likely to be made. That work to address the various problems needs to be supervised by the OCCRC and individually pursued by local groups. Advocacy for children's rights and support for psychosocial development has been recently described by a text entitled Global Impacts on Childhood Social Development by Oberg and Hodges. So you can write to legislatures, organize groups to do so, impress people with the importance of the subject of child rights, early literacy, healthcare, etc. Publications as books, videos, pamphlets, posters, social media pictures, photographs, and paintings for communicating issues to the public and promoting solutions. Research studies with findings transmitted widely in understandable terms for all readers may be helpful. Listen to complaints of children, their caretakers, and teachers. Join advocacy groups or form new ones. Public events can be organized with song and dance highlighting causes. Peaceful, organized demonstrations advocating solutions to issues can also be put together. The bottom line, a long-term plan is needed for promoting optimal psychosocial development globally. Components of such a plan for all children include authoritative parenting, modeling of caring and helping behaviors, early literacy, reading books with a moral, and that teach a lesson, and human relations programs for children. Negatively impactful issues such as armed conflict, food insecurity, weather extremes, etc., must be addressed. Governments, NGOs, and the public need to provide the resources and the personnel to improve psychosocial development for all children. The goal of a more peaceful world and an enhanced quality of life for millions of people should provide the impetus for developing and delivering the required programs. If nations come together, will it, and work on it, it will not be a dream. So I'm going to stop the share. And if you'd like, you could address any questions to me if we're not live in a particular conference. And you can get me at Gerald, Gerald, K like kangaroo, T like toy, Z like zoo, M like in municipal, at AOL.com. Thank you very much for your attention. That ends the program.